Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. Today is Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, and this is the Daily Brief. So, it's been a busy day on the battlefield. It's not as intense as it was yesterday, but no day was intense as it was yesterday. It's still pretty hot, though. 1,400 Russians eliminated, 11 tanks, 43 armored combat vehicles, 28 artillery pieces, 29 vehicles and fuel tanks. At the rate that they're going, it won't be June 1st. It'll be before that. It'll be maybe 2 or 3 days before that, maybe May 27th or so, when they hit 500,000 here. They're at 485 right now. Okay, if we look at the numbers from Andrew Perpetua, we see that it's about 1.5, maybe 2 times the Russian losses to Ukrainian losses from what he is able to count. Air defense destroys all 18 enemy drones within 8 regions, which is a great headline, but there is still a missile, one Iskander ballistic missile from occupied Crimea that apparently got through. If it didn't get through, they would have said that they got that too. So you have to read the entire article. Okay, Ukraine warns Northern Front has significantly worsened as Russia claims capture of several villages. So it is bad in Kharkiv and what's happened, and I'll try to explain some of the reasons behind that. Ukraine's top general says the situation in northern Kharkiv region has significantly worsened. The precise goal of Russia's new push, which began in the early hours of Friday morning, is unclear. It may be to create a buffer zone. That could be it. I don't know. Equally, it could be an attempt to draw Ukrainian forces away from other key Russian objectives further south. That could be it. Again, I don't know. The idea behind the attacks in the Kharkiv region is to stretch our forces and undermine morale. Certainly that's part of it. Now again, let's look at the map. Here's Kharkiv. Here's where most of the fighting has been. And there's also something you want to keep your eye on with Sumy. I'll show you that in just a moment. They'll try to seize the area with a lot of cannon fodder. That's talking about around Kharkiv. What am I talking about around Sumy? Hold on to that thought. So, defeating Russia's operation in Kharkiv Oblast requires defeating Russia's glide bomb threat. So, part of the reason that they can't actually just stop and push them back is because glide bombs are I have to hand it to the Russians. I hate to say this, but they're actually really smart about using these glide bombs, turning bombs that they would have to be over the target into something that they can turn into almost a missile with these glide bombs, and it's pretty effective so far until they have adequate air defense, until they have F-16s up in the air or an adequate number of Air Force that can actually counter the threat. But so it's glide bombs, but it's also a little bit more than that. So Jay in Kyiv says, to those who say that Russians just walked right into Kharkiv region, and I talked about this yesterday, where it was like, whoa, what just happened here? They were just like the front lines were not like we thought that there were going to be a front line, and they just kind of crossed over it. There was no real defenses there. Or where are the fortifications? Zelensky stole the money. I didn't say that one. Due to the West's insane policy of not allowing Ukraine to strike into Russian territory, Ukraine's fortifications are not on the Russian border. They have to pull back from the Russian border, so you have to cross in order to use like American weapons in order to prosecute the war. Judging from the casualty numbers I'm seeing, Russians are now in the kill zone. So that's part of it. So it's part of it's the glide bombs. Part of it is that they can't shoot into Russia with certain Western weapons. Some are allowed, like the UK said, whatever you want to do with it. But that's another piece of the puzzle. Russian troops, now I was talking about Sumy, Russian troops to launch offensive towards Sumy soon, Budanov says. Ukraine's military intel chief warns from his Kharkiv bunker that the Russian forces will launch an offensive in the Sumy region in the coming days. And again, the Sumy region is up here north of Kharkiv, northwest of Kharkiv. Okay, next. But by the way, let's go into that article before I stop that. Denis Yaroslavsky, who commands a unit fighting in the Kharkiv region, said the Russians are raining missiles on Volochansk. They're dropping 5 to 7 bombs every 3 minutes. That's a lot of bombs, right? We can say that we don't see any threat of assault on the city of Kharkiv, but there are a lot of Russians, quite a lot. About 50,000 were on the border. More than 30,000 of Moscow's troops were involved in the current northeastern invasion. But the ISW estimates that you needed maybe 3 times that amount in order to actually meaningfully threaten taking Kharkiv, and they just don't have that kind of power amassed on the border. Okay, U.S. military aid to arrive soon. Well, we've been hearing that and hearing that and hearing that, but right now, Secretary Blinken is actually in Kyiv. I returned to Kyiv today to demonstrate our unwavering support for Ukraine as they defend their freedom against Russian aggression, and that's good. Special Herzon Kat replied, though, please come to Vovchansk and explain to the locals why they cannot defend themselves with American weapons. And that's a really good question. Okay. Now, while we're talking about Kharkiv and potentially Sumy, over the last day, Russian occupiers hit populated areas of Zaporizhzha Oblast 462 times. What just happened here? This is Zaporizhzha down here. So we're just other fronts in the war are still very hot, and we have to be aware of that. Okay, let's switch gears to some things political. Vladimir Putin signed executive orders appointing his executive office, and it listed all the people that were appointed and that sort of thing. The big story is about Andrei Belousov's appointment as a new defense minister, which is kind of an interesting reshuffle. Shoigu is out, Belousov is in. Belousov is to audit the Defense Ministry activities. The budget of the Ministry of Defense and the security bloc was quite recently still around 3% of GDP, and then it grew to 3.4%, and then it grew to 6, 7. In the near future, it may reach the level of the mid-1980s when the share of defense spending on Russian economy amounted to 7.4%. Okay, so I was looking at this, and yeah, if we just look at Soviet military burden, defense spending was around 17% of GDP at its height. Okay, and it couldn't keep, and that's because there was an arms race with the U.S., and they couldn't keep doing that. So the comparable U.S. figure at the time was 6.5% of GDP. And here, although the U.S., what's the U.S. military spending to our GDP right now? And it's only 2.9%. So Russia's moving to a war footing. By the way, Ukraine is at 37% of GDP on military spending for quite obvious reasons. So you can't spend and spend and spend like a drunken sailor, and that's where they're going. But they're going that direction because they're spending to get onto a war footing. So I'm going to talk about this and what Putin's pick tonight in my 3 big stories and amplify what he's spending on or why he's put in office and that sort of thing. So I'm going to skip over that for now. I am going to talk about this, though. It's really interesting. There's a big reshuffle, and Yuri Kuznetsov, head of the Russian Defense Ministry Personnel Department, has been detained in Russia. Well, that's next. If you believe Igor Shushko, and I haven't verified this, but apparently there's more to the story. Purges in Russia. General Kuznetsov's chief of the main personnel directorate and Ministry of the Defense was dragged out of bed in his own house in the middle of the night by military counterintelligence officers wearing balaclavas. Okay, well that's a different story. Also, and this is all part of that same corruption scandal. Sources report that both Tax-Deductible and I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name have submitted their resignations. They were both deputy defense ministers under Shoigu. And then if you go back a little bit, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu and his deputies, Tax-Deductible and Ivanov, remember Ivanov, that was a scandal that kind of kicked everything off, and his accomplices yielded data on classified military projects, including nuclear installations. Okay, I don't know what they were corrupt for exactly, but there's a big corruption within the defense ministry, and pretty much everybody knew it, but now they're doing something about it. Putin appoints ex-secretary of the Russian Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, as his aide. So Shoigu is taking Patrushev's post Patrushev is out. I just thought he was out to pasture yesterday when I reported this, but apparently he's going to be an aide to Putin. Now, he's the guy that masterminded the Prigozhin explosion and took Prigozhin off the map. So he's a loyalist to Putin, as are all the other people that are appointed. And it's really interesting to see just how loyal these guys are to Putin. And I'll talk about that tonight as well. Okay, overnight a freight train crashed, causing it to catch fire, temporarily blocking Moscow-Volgograd line. Russian outlets report that a Ukrainian drone hit the train, causing it to derail. Last little bit, you know that I've been working with Greg Terry on a number of fundraisers. Since Christmas, we've worked together on a bunch of these things. And this was working with Greg and Pete the medic, and we're trying to get money raised for these souped up ambulances. They're called snatches. They're very expensive, but they're highly armored and they can get wounded off the battlefield. I'm not going to stop doing that. I'm going to work with Greg Terry. I've decided this is how I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to show you the update to Jake Broe's fundraiser, not just because it's Jake Broe. That's not it. There's multiple people that have done these fundraisers. Andrew Mercado's on, I think, his 10th. That's freaking remarkable. Arthur Rahe, I think, had the record before Jake Broe just destroyed it. Rick, the Ukrainian, has done multiple fundraisers, and he's constantly fundraising. All these guys should be applauded. This is all awesome. We're all on the same team trying to push the same direction to support Ukraine. But this is remarkable for a different reason. Last night at 9 o'clock, I looked at this, and it was 419,000 out of a new set goal of 500,000. Remember, he started with 40,000 as his goal, and this was on Saturday. And so as of last night, 419,000. Real time, 8 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time in the United States, and it is up to 453,000 now. As people slept out of 500,000, he will push through that 500,000 mark today, I'm pretty sure. That is absolutely remarkable. Remember, about $20,000 per vehicle. So that's going to be pretty significant if he can put 25 vehicles on the ground in Ukraine. And again, it doesn't matter which fundraiser you're involved in. If you're involved in a fundraiser, that's awesome. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.